April 21st. Every year, the city of Rome erupts. Fireworks over the Tiber, parades in the Forum. The Perilia, a birthday party for a civilization that conquered the known world. But if you peel back the marble, if you look beneath the cobblestones of the Via Sacra, you find something far more primal. Rome wasn't born from a committee or a constitution. It was born in the mud. It was born from a broken vow, an absent father, and the cold, calculated murder of a brother. To understand Rome, we have to stop looking at the statues. We have to look at the dirt. We have to go back to 753 BCE, to a world of shadows, wolves, and the terrifying whims of the gods. Before there was a city, there was a girl, Rhea Silvia, a princess of Alba Longa, stripped of her rights and forced into the service of Vesta. Her uncle, the tyrant Amulius, thought he was being clever. By making her a Vestal virgin, he ensured her womb would be a tomb. No heirs, no threats to his stolen throne. But the gods do not care for the politics of men. The Roman writers call it a visitation. In our watercolor reconstruction, we see the temple walls bleed. Mars, the god of war, did not come as a suitor. He came as a force of nature. The scandal of Rhea Silvia is the true foundation of Rome. She claimed a god was the father to save her life. The king claimed she was a liar to take it. But the bloodline was already set. Two hearts began to beat in the dark. Romulus and Remus. The wolf sons were already coming, and they were born with a claim to a throne they had never seen. Amulius couldn't bring himself to spill royal blood directly, so he chose a slower executioner, the Tiber River. In 753 BCE, the Tiber was a monster. It was a wild, flooding beast that swallowed everything in its path. The infants were placed in a basket, a tiny splinter of wood against the crushing weight of the current. They were supposed to drown. They were supposed to be a footnote in a tyrant's reign. Instead, the river receded, depositing the twins at the base of the Palatine Hill, near a wild fig tree. And that is where the myth takes a dark, predatory turn. A she-wolf, the Lupa, approached the crying infants. Ancient history is often sanitized, but let us be clear, this was a predator meeting prey. Yet, she didn't bite. She didn't hunt. She nursed. The founders of Rome didn't drink the milk of human kindness. They drank the milk of a predator. They were raised in the Lupercal, a cave of shadows, learning that the world does not give you what you want. You take it. To be raised by a wolf is a biological impossibility in our world. In the world of 753 BCE, it was a spiritual branding. Romulus and Remus didn't spend their childhood in the sun. They spent it in the Lupercal, the dark, damp womb of the Palatine Hill. They didn't learn to speak. They learned to hunt. They didn't learn to obey. They learned to dominate. This feral DNA is the secret ingredient of the Roman legionary. The belief that beneath the toga and the law, there is always a wolf waiting to be unleashed. But the wolf life had to end. Enter Faustulus, a shepherd in the service of the king. He found them not as infants, but as creatures, somewhere between man and beast. When he brought them home to his wife, Acca Laurentia, the boys didn't just move into a hut. They brought the wild into the human world. The twins grew, and as they grew, the valley between the hills of Rome became their playground. But they weren't just tending sheep. They were outlaws. They were the leaders of a gang of young, disenfranchised shepherds and fugitives. They spent their days raiding the cattle of the wealthy and distributing the spoils to their followers. Even then, before a single stone was laid for Rome, the hierarchy was clear. Romulus was the mind. Remus was the heart. Romulus calculated. Remus acted. They were the first shepherd kings, ruling over a kingdom of dust and stolen livestock. But a destiny of cattle raiding wasn't enough for the sons of Mars. The secret of their birth was a ticking time bomb, and it was about to explode. The revelation came in a moment of crisis. Remus was captured during a raid and taken to Alba Longa, straight into the hands of the tyrant Amulius. It was here that Faustulus finally told Romulus the truth. You are not shepherds. You are kings. And the man holding your brother is the man who tried to drown you. Romulus didn't hesitate. He gathered his band of outcasts and marched on the city of his ancestors. This was the first time Romulus spilled royal blood, but it wouldn't be the last. They didn't just rescue Remus, they dismantled a dynasty. They tore Amulius from his throne and executed him. They restored their grandfather, Numitor, to the crown. But after the blood had dried, the brothers realized they couldn't stay in Alba Longa. They didn't want to inherit someone else's kingdom. They wanted to build their own. They turned their eyes back to the place where the river had saved them. Back to the 7 hills. Back to the mud. They returned to the place where it all began, but they didn't return as children. They returned as architects of a new world. However, the first stone hadn't even been laid before the foundation began to crack. Romulus chose the Palatine Hill, the site of the Lupercal, the place of their survival. It was defensive, steep, and steeped in memory. Remus chose the Aventine. To the modern eye, they are just hills. To the brothers, they were opposing altars. They couldn't agree on a name. They couldn't agree on a leader. For the first time in their lives, the Wolf Sons were looking at each other not as brothers, but as rivals. In the ancient world, when men cannot decide, they ask the sky. This was the Augury. Each brother took his station. Remus on the Aventine, Romulus on the Palatine. Remus saw them first, 6 vultures cutting through the morning mist. He claimed victory by right of priority. But then the sky over the Palatine exploded. 12 vultures appeared for Romulus. He claimed victory by right of number. The gods had spoken, but they had spoken in riddles. The followers of Remus cheered for the first scene. The followers of Romulus cheered for the greatest sign. The air grew thick with the scent of civil war before a single wall was even built. The brothers were no longer speaking. They were interpreting. Romulus decided to end the debate with action. He yoked a white bull and a white cow to a bronze plow and began to carve a circle around the Palatine. This wasn't just construction. This was the Pomerium, a sacred, magical boundary. Inside the line was the city, protected by the gods. Outside was the wild. To cross this line with a weapon or without permission was more than a crime. It was a sacrilege. Romulus was building a cage for his new kingdom, and Remus stood on the outside, watching his inheritance disappear behind a trench of mud. Then came the moment that changed history. Remus, fueled by bitterness and perhaps a final desperate attempt to reclaim his brother's attention, did the unthinkable. He laughed. He ran. And with a single mocking leap, he jumped over the rising wall. "Is this the great defense of your city?" he asked. Romulus didn't argue. He didn't shout. He struck. The bronze blade found his brother's chest exactly over the sacred line. As Remus fell into the dirt he had just mocked, Romulus spoke the words that would define Roman foreign policy for 1,000 years. "So perish everyone who shall hereafter leap over my wall." The twin was dead. The king was born. And the mud of the Palatine was stained a color that Rome would carry to the ends of the earth. The wall was finished, but the city was silent. Romulus had his kingdom, but he had lost his mirror. Tradition tells us that even in his triumph, Romulus was haunted. He set a second throne beside his own, an empty seat for the brother he had slain, symbolizing a Rome that was always meant to be two, but forced to be one. Remus was buried on the Aventine, the hill that should have been his kingdom, but his death became the sacred wound of Rome. Every law, every boundary, and every legionary oath was now backed by the memory of that strike. In Rome, the law was more important than blood. The state was more important than the family. But a city needs more than a king and a wall. It needs people. Romulus opened the gates of the Palatine and declared it an asylum. He didn't invite the noble or the wealthy. He invited the outcasts. The runaway slaves, the debtors, the murderers, and the exiles. Rome was built by the sons of the wolf, men who had nothing to lose and everything to take. This border mentality became the Roman DNA. They were a civilization of survivors who believed that to stop expanding was to die. They didn't just build a city, they built a fortress of outcasts that would eventually swallow the world. 2,700 years later, we still celebrate the Perilia. We see the Colosseum, the Pantheon, and the sprawling ruins of an eternal city. We see the gold. But beneath the tourist paths and the marble columns, the mud of 753 BCE is still there. Every time a nation draws a hard border, every time a leader chooses the state over their own blood, the ghost of Romulus is watching. Rome wasn't built in a day. It was built on a sacrifice. And every April 21st, we don't just celebrate a birthday. We celebrate the day a brother died, so an empire could live.